Hello and welcome to another episode of Ticker Symbol Live, our look into ARK Invest's daily holdings and changes into their positions as we understand their vision of the future and how they're investing in it. Today is a very special day. It is the last trading day before ARKX launches tomorrow. ARKX, of course, is ARK Invest's upcoming fund themed around space exploration, so a sixth actively managed ETF. I'm probably going to take some time later in the week, update the ARK reactor, and make all the changes I need to handle the sixth fund and looking at things 7 ways instead of 6. I look at all of their actively managed ETFs individually as well as combined to make my own investment decisions and keep track of what ARK is doing day by day. So I figured what we would do today is just jump right into what is happening with ARKX, remind you of my predictions of the stocks inside ARKX, and give you a full day to do research on this massive new bundle of stocks focused around space exploration. So let's get right into it. I'm pretty excited. So what's going on? So ARK's space exploration ETF and the Canadian version of that from Emerge are set to list concurrently on Tuesday, March 30th. So if you're watching this in real time or later today, you have some time to do your last minute research on the stocks going into this fund. This is her first launch, Kathy Wood's first launch in 2 years, and the previous launch before that was ARKF, ARK Invest fund themed around the financial technology revolution or fintech stocks. So ARKF launched in 2019 and it launched at $20. So my expectation is ARKX will release at $20 per share like the rest of their funds and quickly move up and down in accordance with all of the great stocks that are in it as we find out what's in it. So that's the summary of what's going on. We can also take a look at their big ideas. Orbital Aerospace is a big idea this year, and it's broken up into 3 parts, right? So first thing I'll call out is its rockets and satellite costs declines are upending what used to be, a crazy high cost thing to do, launch something into space. And now that's becoming affordable enough for people in the private sector to jump in. Thanks to advancements in deep learning, mobile connectivity, sensors, 3D printing, robotics, and so on, those costs have been greatly declined, right? As a result, the number of satellite launches and rocket landings is proliferating. And as we all know from Wright's Law, the more something happens, specifically the more something cumulatively doubles, the cheaper it gets. So now there's more access to launching stuff in space and returning it from space, as well as what we'll see is the future of travel. Pretty interesting. And then according to ARK's research, the orbital aerospace opportunity could reach $370 billion annually. And here's how they break that up. Global connectivity, so microsatellites in low Earth orbit, hypersonic point-to-point travel, and of course, eventually colonizing the moon, Mars, and beyond, which is my personal favorite, and of course, the most far-reaching in time. So, I hope to see the starts of a Mars colony in my lifetime, but I definitely expect to see hypersonic point-to-point travel in the next, say, decade, and global connectivity in the next, say, half decade to a decade. So I think these are ordered from most near term to most far term. We can talk all day about rocket reusability and launches. I'm going to blow past this because we're going to do a whole big ideas video on orbital aerospace soon. And the thing I want to focus on is the 2 big business areas that we're going to look at today. So satellite broadband revenues, this is giving the whole world, the whole surface of the Earth internet via satellite-based broadband. So could be a $40 billion annual addressable market. And this is just providing internet and other communications to wirelessly from satellites to everywhere on Earth. So think about all the rural areas that can't get access to internet-based infrastructure. Think about countries with infrastructure problems in general. They can't keep up in terms of internet technology. And so the solution is to release a bunch of satellites that just put the signal out everywhere on the planet. And then a hypersonic flight is the other thing, right? So 4.5 billion passengers flew in 2018. 15% of those flights were over 7 hours long. That's 680 million passengers. Let's say 0.4% of those fly private. So that's kind of the very, very wealthy. So that's 2.7 million people, right? And they would be probably willing to pay $100,000 per hypersonic flight. And again, the important thing to remember here is this isn't a personal expense. This is a business expense. These are executives that need to go to meetings. These are celebrities that need to go to events. These are, the World Economic Forums and the other big events every year with headline speakers. That's the market that hypersonic flight will capture, right? So $100,000 per hypersonic flight means $270 billion in annual revenues if people are saying, hey, I will trade the money for the time, right? Because what hypersonic flight does is it saves 13 hours from New York City to Japan, right? Massive amount of time savings. So if you need to be in two different parts of the world in the same day, hypersonic is the only way to make that happen. So another place where this might save you money is think about health insurance packages that are like, I want to get to the best hospital in the world, no matter where it is. I'm going to pay whatever price it takes to get there. I'm going to take a hypersonic flight from point A to point B to get there literally as fast as humanly possible at any cost I need to pay that, right? So that's what's going on with hypersonic flight. Executives and maybe in the future medevacs around the world. Why are we talking about big ideas? Again, because that leads me to my stock predictions of what was in ARKX. So as soon as ARKX was announced, I released a video that focused on predicting what was in this thing. Because at the time, the news was just, hey, we have no idea what's going to be in this thing. It's broken up into weird categories. So I took my best guess, and we get to see how right or wrong I am tomorrow. Let's jump into it. So this is straight from that video over 2 months ago now. We learned that it was going to come out 75 days after the SEC filing, so I was off by 1 day, not too bad. So I predicted March 29th release. Today is March 29th, and it releases tomorrow. We know it's conviction weighted, just like the other ARK funds, and that it will be managed by Cathie Wood. And what that means to us is that we can pop it into the ARK reactor and combine it with the other funds like we've been doing with the other 5, and there won't be any problem with that. So that's great news for us. And here are the 4 categories of stocks that'll be in it. Orbital aerospace companies, suborbital aerospace companies, enabling technologies, and aerospace beneficiaries. So orbital aerospace companies are those that launch, make, service, or operate platforms in orbital space, including satellites and launch vehicles. Man, if ARKX was a if SpaceX was a public company, I think it would be like 100% of this category. Suborbital aerospace companies launch, make, service, or operate platforms in suborbital aerospace, drones, air taxis, and other airborne electric vehicles. So in that drone video, we talked a lot about stocks that might be in ARKX, like AV, Aerodyne. Enabling technologies. So this is artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, materials, and energy storage. Again, lots of overlap with ARKQ, so we'll check that out in a minute. And I just want to call out artificial intelligence, robotics, and energy storage. Boy, that sounds like Tesla could be in this fund. Knock on wood, it might be, but I'd love to see Tesla in a fund at not the number 1 position. But keep in mind that by the language in this filing, Tesla does fit the bill for this fund. And then aerospace beneficiaries, aerospace activities, agriculture, internet access, global positioning, construction, and imaging. So this could be anything from Netflix to Garmin to NVIDIA to lots of other funky companies, right? Deere, et cetera, that are benefiting from orbital aerospace technologies, right? So think about if Starlink went public and everyone in the world got internet, and you could invest in that, that would be in this fund, but also Netflix, which would be a beneficiary of everyone getting internet. Because I imagine one of the big first things a household with new internet access would do is go and get a Netflix subscription or a Hulu subscription or so on. So that's what they mean by beneficiary here. Great, rolling right through it. So we can talk about ARKQ because ARKQ currently has space exploration in it, right? But we're not going to do that. Instead, what I did was I looked at the space exploration fund managed by ARK Invest in Japan, the Nikko Asset Management Fund, right? And so if you go to their other financial products, you can see they have a fund, a mutual fund dedicated to space exploration. It's tiny. We'll blow right through that because that's the heart of the video that I was just talking about. Everyone should go watch that before tomorrow because I sort of walk through my analysis there. I'll breeze over it here so we can get right into the stocks. Nikko Asset Management manages this fund. It's a small fund, and what I did was I worked through it using Google Translate the best I could. So it's a $20 million fund, so very, very tiny. At the time I did this analysis, that's like 15 times smaller than ARK Invest's position in just Nintendo, right? And so here's what's in this thing. Iridium, Xilinx, Trimble, Splunk, which we know ARK Invest is divesting from, AeroVironment, AVAV, excuse me, I think I said a different stock before, AVAV, Lockheed Martin, Protolabs, Stratasys, so some 3D printing companies, right? FLIR, which we know that got acquired by a different company. I'm blanking on the name right now, but FLIR is no longer going to be its own stock. Dassault Systems, JD, Teradyne, Amazon, Kratos Defense, L3 Harris, Airbus Group, Virgin Galactic, which I expect to be in the top 10, Autodesk, Heiko, Garmin. Garmin is a GPS big enabler. Garmin makes all the GPS units as well as some GPS-enabled tech, everything from smartwatches to the GPS antennas that go on things like drones, boats, ships, planes, cars, etc. So lots and lots of GPS products from Garmin. Deere, Thales, Materialize, UPS, which is getting into the drone business, Alphabet, Boeing, Aerojet Rocketdyne, Honeywell, and Spirit Aerosystems. That's what's in this mutual fund. I just listed like 30 stocks, and so those are all contenders for being in ARKX tomorrow at launch. That's why I'm going through this list for you. So there's a bunch of things that happen in this mutual fund because it's only reported quarter by quarter. The top 10 positions tend to change every time they report their updated holdings just because they're so long between reports, right? So what I did was I gathered their most recent holdings and I adjusted what I think would be in that fund now based on their most recent holdings. So I released a whole bunch of spreadsheets that help other people do that for themselves. And this is what the new Nikko Asset Management made up by Alex fund looks like. It's about 7.5% Iridium, AVAV, Protolabs, Trimble, and Stratasys would make up the top 5 positions, maybe with some Xilinx, Lockheed Martin, and so on down the list, right? So this is the weighting distribution that I'm taking a guess at. So we have Netflix at the bottom, we have Alibaba at the bottom, we have Nvidia at the bottom, Ansys, Twitter, Google, sort of the beneficiary class stuff at the bottom, and we have the enabling and core technologies to aerospace at the top, right? So Iridium, Garmin, Xilinx, Lockheed Martin, those types of stocks should sit near the top of the fund, right? So Iridium is another one of those GPS type satellite stocks. Iridium, we can Google it a little more later, but they pop down a signal to the planet that is used everywhere, right? So Iridium is a type of GPS satellite. I hope that's what the stock is. I used to work on the GPS 3A satellites a long time ago, and we used Iridium Networks technology in those. So that's where I'm recognizing the name from, but we can Google it and get into specifics later. I don't want to get that wrong for you. So what I did was I updated these holdings and I made sure that they are reflected in the fund. So the new holdings, again, Iridium, Trimble, Space, Kratos, Lockheed Martin, Deere, right, Honeywell. These should make up the top of the list. That's all this is trying to say. And then we compare it to ARKQ and see like what's going to happen with ARKQ. So, lots and lots of analysis, but here's the heart of where I want to get to, right? So you can do a couple things here and see like, hey, how does this overlap with ARK Invest's existing holdings if instead of being a Japanese mutual fund, this was a America-based actively managed ETF, right? So if I do that, here's what I get. So the biggest stocks in it would be stocks like Tencent. They would be stocks like Protolabs, Stratasys, and Materialize. They would be stocks like Iridium, right? Because those are some of ARK Invest's biggest holdings already today that we know they have high conviction in because they exist in other of their funds. So ordered by total weight, we would see Tencent, Protolabs, Materialize, Iridium, Stratasys. Again, I'm avoiding Splunk because we know they're divesting. JD, Trimble, Alibaba, Nvidia, Deere Systems, Kratos Security, right? Netflix, Amazon, and so on, right? So stocks specific to what I think will be an ARKX are these guys right here. Here are their tickers. Garmin, Boeing, UPS, right? These are all new holdings we might expect to see in the ARK reactor by including ARKX, as opposed to stocks already held in other ARK funds. Tencent, Protolabs, Materialize, Iridium, Alibaba, Nvidia, right? And I'm calling out which funds those are already in. So again, that's because we're talking about orbital aerospace, suborbital aerospace, things like enabling technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, and energy storage are what's leading me to believe it's Tesla. I could see Rocket Lab. This is a great call out. So one stock that didn't exist when I did this analysis was ticker VACQ. I believe that's Vector Acquisitions, which is the SPAC merging with Rocket Lab, right? And that ticker symbol will be RKLB, I believe, when it reverse merges later this summer. I believe that happens end of Q2. So that could be a stock that ends up in this fund that I couldn't have predicted because it just didn't exist in the middle of January. Excellent call. So I looked at the different stuff going on in these stocks, which stocks are moving up, which stocks are moving down. I won't bore you with these details, but basically what that did was identify JD, Google, as Tencent as real contenders here, just based on changes in ARK Invest's conviction of these stocks. So look for those in this fund. And then we looked at the stocks moving down in conviction, right? Xilinx, I believe this is Autodesk, Teradyne, FLIR, and so on. I would expect them to be low positions in this fund, if not non-existent. And Amazon, again, just because it's a cash-like position, but it could be also a real beneficiary. For example, if everyone gets access to internet access, they're going to be shopping more on Amazon, right? So here's what I think. Here's what was going on in ARKQ at the time. Here's what was going on with their assets under management at the time. We can skip some of this like detailed analysis stuff. Here are my ultimate guesses of what's going to be in this fund tomorrow. And again, I want to be clear, I made these guesses over 2 months ago. So things like Rocket Lab, new stocks, new changes to existing stocks, they're not accounted for in this guess, but I think these guesses will be pretty good, right? So, So Tencent, Iridium, Virgin Galactic, Protolabs, Materialize, Trimble, Nvidia, JD, AVAV. I don't know why I can't remember the name of this stock today, but AVAV, right? That drone company, the military drone company. Lockheed Martin, Deere, Honeywell, Kratos, Stratasys, Google, and Amazon. Those are all companies that they hold today. In the Nico fund only that we might see included in ARKX for the first time are things like Boeing, UPS, Garmin, right? And then a couple other smaller companies in the market that could be big leaders of this fund. And then ARK funds only, I can imagine seeing Tesla, Caterpillar, NNDM, right? I am not doing well at remembering the names of these stocks today. Roku, we could see. Wait, this isn't Roku. Sorry, what is ROK? Give me 1 second here. Rockwell Automation, and I'm going to get the name of this stock too. AeroVironment. I keep wanting to say Aerojet Rocketdyne. I'm talking about AeroVironment. And then, of course, the other biggest one would be, where are we here? Baidu, big in automation. And then Workhorse. Workhorse being a beneficiary and a drone stock, right? And then we could see for the first time in an actively managed ETF that's publicly available, things like Starlink and SpaceX, right? Kathy Wood often talks about wanting to do a public-private option. This would be a great time to connect with Elon Musk's SpaceX and Starlink and get regular public investors the ability to invest in those stocks. I'm not saying that will happen. I'm saying that might happen, and that would be super awesome, right? NNDM, of course, Nano Dimensions, the coffee finally kicking in, and we can see that there's a good mix of Nico fund only stocks ARK fund only stocks, and things that overlap in both funds that could make it into ARKX tomorrow. So we'll see how right I am about that. Cool. And then the only other thing I wanted to point out was ARK Invest's funds typically launch at the $20 mark. If you go back and you look at all of their actively managed ETFs today, the release price seems to be $20, and it scales from there accordingly to how the funds, the stocks inside the fund behave. So there's a reasonable chance that ARKX might launch tomorrow at $20 at market open. I'm going to take questions real quick, but hopefully that gives you a sense of everything you need to know about ARKX before tomorrow. So again, these are the companies I would go research today to see if you can make any meaningful decisions or investment research based on the fact that these might be included in a new ARK fund tomorrow. I'll also call out Elon Musk's brother has a company called Square Roots. They focus on vertical agriculture, so sort of technology-enabled farming and that kind of stuff. And agriculture is specifically called out as a beneficiary of ARKX's technology. So a beneficiary type stock would be an agriculture type stock. So it would be cool if they linked up with Kimball Musk, Elon's brother, and had some public offering to hold this private company, Square Roots, which is Kimball Musk's company. Again, not saying those will happen, just saying it would be cool if they did, and Cathie Wood has talked about that kind of stuff in the past. So I'll break here for comments. Hopefully this gives you some insight into what might be in this fund tomorrow. Its launch price, again, might be $20 tomorrow. It's tied to some of the big ideas already announced in 2021 big ideas, right? So I'll leave this on this slide here. So ARK Invest has a real bullish take on space exploration as a big theme, enough to make it a sixth actively managed fund in America, right? So hopefully this gave you a lot of information on what's happening around ARKX, when and how. Cool. Looking at comments, yep, Square Roots grows food inside of containers in Brooklyn. They do it using a lot of cool technology. They do it in a way that minimizes the amount of water and resources needed to grow that food and the amount of physical space, right? Which is exactly how you would want to grow food, for example, on Mars or on a lunar colony, right? So advances in agriculture will be very, very necessary to do the same things we take for granted on Earth, but on other planet surfaces. You look up ARK stocks closely. What part of ARK ETFs is less desirable against other ETFs? I don't really think this is the right way to think about it. When you buy into an ETF, you're buying into the whole bundle. So I think you're leaving that up to the active manager to decide what's more or less desirable. I think if you want to just take their most desirable stocks, what you would do there is you would look at their highest conviction positions, right? So their biggest positions, and you would watch them over time and get in on a dip, right? Knowing that those are going to be the outsized positions determining the performance of the overall fund. So for example, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the big dip in Teladoc, right? And it dipped like 30 or 40%. And I was saying I bought in hard. I bought many hundreds of that stock a couple weeks ago, expecting it to ride up, right? So my hope is to make a 50% return on that because it was down over 33%, right? So that's the kind of stuff that I do in my day-to-day is I look for their highest conviction picks, which may not always be obvious because they might be a stock that's in multiple funds and not have a huge position in any one fund. And those are sort of my guiding stars of where I look at my research in the market. And that's how I use them. Not that some of their other picks are less desirable. I absolutely think that Raytheon could make it into this stock, into this fund. I think I even call out RTX somewhere here. Looks like I do not, but yeah, Raytheon is a total shoe-in. I believe Raytheon is going to make it into this fund. I don't know how I missed Raytheon on this list, to be honest. But clearly I did. My take on Iridium, yeah, I expect it to still be a top position in the fund just because it's still one of ARK Invest's bigger holdings, right? So maybe now's a good time to go to the ARK Reactor and wrap up just by looking at some of the data in ARKQ today, right? ARKQ being the fund that has space exploration as one of its themes. We'll do that very quickly, and then we'll wrap up. Stop screen, share screen, application window. So what you're looking at here is the ARK Reactor. It's looking at the holdings of March 29th compared to March 26th, which was Friday. And we're just looking at ARKQ. I prepared for this question. And you can see that, so these are the biggest positions in ARKQ. And Iridium is, where is Iridium here? Iridium sits near the middle. Iridium, they have over $355 million in Iridium just in ARKQ. If we zoom all the way back and look at their actively managed ETFs, and we try to find Iridium quickly, we can see that they actually have $355 million in it. Excuse me. They have $281 million in ARKK and another $75 million in ARKQ. So Iridium is actually ARK Invest's 40th overall biggest position. Not a small position by any means. It is also the number one biggest position in the Japanese Nikko Asset Management Space Exploration Mutual Fund, which makes me very bullish on it being included in ARKX. So that's the answer to this question. Whoops, what is your take on Iridium? My take is it will take a top spot along with Virgin Galactic in ARKX tomorrow when it announces. I saw this. This is actually non-news. This language, I want to clear this up too, and this will be the last thing I say. This language has always been in their prospectuses. They don't do this. They self-impose a 10% limit. So ARK Invest now allowed up to have 30% allocation in one stock. Do you think they made that change for ARKX? No, this is not a change. They are not changing their investment strategy. This is non-news. Do not listen to this. It's really important to understand that tomorrow we should not expect Tesla to be a 30% position in any one fund. Somebody just read a prospectus and saw that for the first time and called it out. This has always been true, and ARK Invest self-imposes that 10% limit. So until they say, hey, we're going to allow stocks to run way more before we trade out of them, which would inherently make them much riskier, by the way, I don't believe this. So great call, Austin. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. I know you're just the messenger here. I'm just leaving this up to explain. You can go back to past prospectuses and read this last year. It's not new language. Great. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I want this to be very ARKX focused. ARKX releases tomorrow, March 30th, 2021. I think it will release at $20. It's conviction weighted and managed by Cathie Wood. They have an existing space exploration mutual fund, which we use to look at stocks to see which ones we could predict would be in ARKX tomorrow. Biggest contenders are companies like Iridium, Garmin, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon. The biggest enabling and the biggest enablers, that's what I just listed. The biggest beneficiaries should be things like Amazon. What else? Netflix, Shopify, right? Like things where now that you have internet, these are the things you're going to be doing: shopping online, being entertained online, Spotify, etc. And then the enabling technologies could lead us to things like Tesla, right? Which is artificial intelligence, robotics, energy storage, or a completely different direction like Xilinx, which makes field programmable Gatorades, right? FPGAs. So it just depends on what ARK Invest sees are the primary enabling technologies, more software stuff or more hardware stuff. This is Ticker Symbol Live. My name is Alex, reminding you that the best investment you can make is in you, and maybe in ARKX tomorrow. Thanks for watching.